The bank froze the joint account and told me the request had come from my partner. I was standing at the counter with my phone pressed to my ear, listening to the woman explain that it wasn't an error, that the flag was intentional, that access had been temporarily restricted for my protection. She said my partner had sounded concerned. She said he provided details only someone close would know. I hung up before she finished. I met Ethan later that same day because my car wouldn't start in the underground garage. I was sitting behind the wheel, key turned, engine dead when he knocked on the window. He didn't ask if I needed help. He pointed to the dashboard light and told me exactly what it meant. He said the battery wasn't dead, just confused. He said newer systems lock themselves sometimes. He said he'd seen it before. He fixed it in under a minute. He didn't open the hood. He didn't use tools. He reached in, pressed something I couldn't see, waited, then told me to try again. The engine started cleanly, like nothing had been wrong. He stepped back and said I was good to go. I asked how he knew what to do. He said he lived in the building and had helped a few neighbors already. He said the garage wiring was temperamental. He said management never warned anyone. He walked away before I could thank him. An hour later, there was a note under my door with his number on it. Just the number. No name. No explanation. Written neatly, centered on the page. I didn't text him that night. The account stayed frozen. I tried logging in from my laptop instead of my phone. Same message. Temporary restriction. Review in progress. The next morning, my credit card declined at a cafe I went to every day. I texted the number. He answered immediately and said he'd been wondering when I'd reach out. He said the building had sent another email about the garage issue and thought I should see it. He forwarded it before I could ask. The email didn't mention my car. It mentioned security upgrades, access control, resident safety. He asked if everything else was okay. I said yes. It wasn't a lie yet. We started talking after that without deciding to. Short exchanges. Practical things. He pointed out which elevator was faster, which grocery delivery service actually showed up on time. He noticed when I came home late and asked if I wanted him to wait in the lobby while I parked. I told myself it was temporary. One evening when my card declined again and the cashier looked at me too long, I felt my throat close in a way that surprised me. I stepped outside and called Ethan without thinking. He didn't ask questions. He told me to come down to the lobby. He was already there, sitting on the arm of a chair like he'd been waiting. He handed me his phone and said to call the bank again. He stood close enough that I could feel his arm near my back, not touching, just there. When the representative asked security questions, he stepped away. When my voice shook, he stepped back in. The call ended with nothing resolved. He said I could use his card for groceries until things cleared. He said it casually, like borrowing a pen. He said I didn't have to explain anything. He said everyone needed a bridge sometimes. I told him I didn't usually need help. He smiled and said neither did he. Until he did. That night, he walked me to my door and waited until I was inside before leaving. He didn't come in. He didn't ask to. The next morning, there was a notification from the bank. Account review extended. I forwarded it to Ethan without thinking. He replied with a single line. "We'll figure it out." I believed him. By the third day, Ethan had become the place where things stopped unraveling. Not dramatically, quietly. He didn't ask for updates about the bank. He asked whether I'd eaten. When I said no, he showed up downstairs with takeout from the place on the corner I'd stopped going to because it felt indulgent. He said they messed up orders less after 8. He was right. He didn't let me pay him back. Not because he refused, because he never framed it as lending. He just paid and handed me the bag like the exchange was already complete. The closeness didn't arrive through conversation. It arrived through proximity, through the way he stood near when I made calls I dreaded, through the way he waited without checking his phone when I put someone on hold, through the way he didn't fill silence with reassurance. One afternoon, I came home to a message from my ex, short, polite. It said he'd spoken to the bank again and that things were being handled. It said the freeze was temporary. It said I shouldn't worry. I showed it to Ethan without explanation. He read it once and handed the phone back. He didn't comment on the wording. He asked if I wanted to respond. I said no. He nodded like that was an answer he'd expected. After that, he started handling small things without asking. He called the parking office and got my permit extended when it expired. He noticed my fridge light flickered and replaced it before I realized it was out. He left a spare charger on my desk because he'd seen me unplug mine twice in one evening. I didn't tell him where things were. He learned. One night, when my card declined again at the grocery store, I didn't feel embarrassment. I felt relief that he was there. He didn't react. He didn't look at me. He just stepped forward and paid, then pushed the cart like the interruption hadn't happened. In the car, I apologized. He said for what? I said for needing help. He said that wasn't what was happening. He said needing help implied I was failing at something. He said this was just a temporary redistribution. He said things shifted sometimes and then shifted back. He said it like someone describing weather. The next morning, I woke up to an alert from my bank. Authorized user updated. I didn't remember adding anyone. I stared at it longer than necessary, then forwarded it to Ethan. He replied almost immediately. He said that explained the delay. He said sometimes accounts moved faster when a second person was listed. He said it didn't give him control. He said it was just visibility. He added that we could remove it later. I didn't ask when later was. That evening, he stayed over for the first time. Not in the bed. On the couch. He said he wanted to make sure I slept. He set an alarm on his watch so his phone wouldn't light up the room. He didn't touch anything that wasn't offered. In the morning, he was already gone. On the counter, there was a note with two things written on it. A customer service number. And a time. Try then, he'd written. I called at that time. The hold was shorter. The tone was different. The representative spoke to me like the issue was already understood. She said the review was nearly complete. She said access would be restored soon. She said I was lucky to have support. When I hung up, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Any movement? I said yes. He replied with a thumbs up emoji and nothing else. That was when I realized I hadn't thought about my ex all day. Not once. The restoration didn't come back all at once. It arrived in pieces, and Ethan was there for each one. First, my debit card worked again for small amounts. Groceries. Gas. Nothing large. I noticed because the cashier smiled at me like normal and didn't hesitate. I texted Ethan without thinking. Worked. He replied, good, and asked what I'd bought. When I told him, he said that made sense. He didn't ask why. Later that day, the bank sent another alert. Spending limits adjusted. I hadn't requested it. I checked the details. Daily caps. Categories smoothed out. Nothing extreme. Just guided. Like the system assumed I needed help pacing myself. I forwarded it to Ethan. He said that was common during reviews. He said it prevented backsliding while accounts stabilized. He said it usually reverted on its own. He said, usually the way you say weather permitting. That night he cooked in my kitchen. Not a date. Not a gesture. He said it was easier than ordering again. He didn't ask where anything was. He found the pan I liked. He salted before tasting. He washed his hands twice, careful, methodical. We ate standing up, leaning against the counter. He told me about a job he'd left years ago because it had required too much improvisation. He said he preferred systems that behaved when you treated them right. I listened. I didn't relate it to anything else. After dinner, he asked if I'd logged into my banking app since the update. I said no. He asked if I wanted to. I said yes. He sat beside me on the couch, close enough to see the screen but not touching. When I typed my password, he turned his head slightly away, like privacy still mattered. He pointed out where the new limits were listed. He explained what each one meant without using technical language. He said nothing about control. He said rails. Later, when I went to shower, I left my phone on the table without thinking. When I came back, it was exactly where I'd left it. Screen dark. Notifications cleared. He said he'd stepped outside to take a call while I was gone. I believed him. The next morning, my paycheck hit the account. Not frozen. Available. I stared at the number longer than necessary. Relief moved through me in a slow, unfamiliar way, like something returning after being numb. I texted Ethan. "It's back." He replied almost immediately. "I know. That should have registered." Instead, I felt held. That evening, I noticed something else. The joint account, the one my ex and I had never fully disentangled, was gone from my dashboard. Not hidden. Closed. A line item showed account consolidated. I hadn't initiated that. I scrolled for details. There were none. I called the bank. The representative confirmed it. She said the request had come from an authorized party. She said it was cleaner this way. She said loose ends often cause future issues. I asked who the authorized party was. She gave me a name. Ethan's full name. Not the shortened version he'd given me. The one on official records. When I told him that night, he didn't deny it. He said the joint account had been a liability. He said your ex still technically had pathways into your financial life. He said it was safer to sever it completely. He said the bank wouldn't have done it without consent. I asked whose consent. He said yours. He said it was part of the review process I'd agreed to when I forwarded him the notifications. He said implied authorization was still authorization. He said the important thing was that it was done. I told him I hadn't known that would happen. He said I hadn't needed to. He said stress made people cling to things that hurt them. He said he was helping me let go. That night, he slept in the bed. Not because we decided it, because neither of us moved. In the dark, he wrapped an arm around me with the same calm certainty he used for everything else. It wasn't possessive. It was anchoring. I slept deeply. In the morning, I woke up before him and checked my phone. There was a new notification waiting. Primary account holder updated. I sat there very still and watched his chest rise and fall. For a moment, I told myself this was what stability felt like. Then I noticed the wording. Updated. Not added. The shift became undeniable when I tried to move money. Not much. Just enough to pay a contractor I'd been postponing. I entered the amount, confirmed, waited. The app spun, then displayed a message I hadn't seen before. Pending review. No error. No denial. Just suspension. I refreshed. Same result. I checked the account details more carefully this time. My name was still there. But beneath it, smaller, was a line I hadn't noticed before. Account managed by authorized partner. I didn't call the bank. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited for Ethan to wake up. He stirred a few minutes later, calm, unhurried, like there was nowhere he needed to be immediately. He reached for me automatically, hand settling on my waist, grounding, familiar. I didn't pull away. I asked him if he'd seen the new message. He said yes. I asked him what it meant. He said it meant the system was still smoothing things out. He said after disruptions, safeguards stayed in place longer than people expected. He said it prevented impulsive decisions. I asked if I could still move my own money. He said of course. Then he paused. He said just not without alignment. That word again. I asked what alignment meant. He said it meant we didn't work against each other. He said stress had already cost me enough. He said he didn't want me slipping back into panic-driven choices. He said this way, nothing sudden could hurt me. He said it gently. I told him I wanted to handle it myself. He nodded like he'd been waiting for me to say that. He said okay. He said we could do it together. He took my phone, not abruptly, not possessively. He asked before touching the screen. He navigated quickly, familiar with paths I hadn't memorized. He submitted the transfer request again, added a note, tagged it as necessary. Try now, he said, handing the phone back. This time it went through. Relief hit me fast and left just as quickly. I asked him how he knew what to write. He said he'd been watching patterns. He said the system trusted consistency more than authority. I didn't ask how long he'd been watching. After that, the house shifted. Not physically. Relationally. He stopped asking if I wanted help and started telling me when things were easier if he handled them. He didn't frame it as control. He framed it as care. He anticipated friction before I felt it and removed it quietly. He paid a bill I'd forgotten without mentioning it. He rescheduled a meeting I was dreading before I decided to cancel. He reminded me to eat, not because I'd skipped meals before, but because he said blood sugar mattered when people were under strain. I let him. One evening, I got a message from my ex short. Neutral. He said the bank had confirmed he no longer had access to anything connected to me. He said he hoped I was well. I read it twice. Then I noticed something else. I hadn't received any bank notifications that day. Not one. I checked my settings. Alerts were on. Delivery was active. But the activity log showed they'd been acknowledged. Time-stamped. Cleared. I hadn't opened them. When I asked Ethan about it, he didn't hesitate. He said he'd filtered them. He said constant alerts kept me on edge. He said if something mattered, he'd tell me. He said I trusted him to keep things steady. I said I hadn't said that. He looked at me genuinely surprised. He said my actions had. That night, when I went to bed, he didn't ask. He pulled the covers back like it was obvious where he belonged. As he fell asleep, his arm heavy across my middle, I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember the last decision I'd made without running it past him first. I couldn't place it. Not clearly. The breaking point didn't come with a fight. Came with a purchase. I tried to book a flight that afternoon. Nothing dramatic. A short trip I'd been postponing. I entered my details, chose the seat I liked, clicked confirm. The screen refreshed. Payment method unavailable. I tried another card. Same result. I opened my banking app. The balance was there. The limits hadn't changed. Everything looked normal until I clicked into permissions. There was a new line. Spending approvals routed through primary account holder. I didn't have to ask who that was. When Ethan came home, I was sitting at the table with my laptop open. The booking page still frozen mid-step. I didn't look up when he entered. I waited for him to notice. He did. He set his keys down carefully and asked where I was trying to go. I told him. He nodded like the destination itself explained the problem. He said the timing wasn't ideal. He said travel created instability when things were just starting to settle. He said stress stacked fast when people left their support systems too early. I asked him if he blocked the payment. He didn't answer immediately. He asked why I needed to go now. I said I didn't need permission to leave my own city. He said he wasn't giving permission. He said he was pacing recovery. That word again, but heavier this time. I asked him to lift the restriction. He said he could. He said he didn't think he should. I stood up then. Not abruptly. Slowly. I told him this wasn't what I'd agreed to. He said I hadn't agreed to most of what had happened. He said that was the point. He said when people were overwhelmed, consent became fragmented. He said someone had to act on the larger pattern. I asked him when I'd stop being that someone. He said when the bank froze the account. He said everything after that had proven he was right. I felt something slide into place then. Not fear. Recognition. I told him to give me full access back. He said no. Not harshly. Not coldly. Just no. He said giving it back abruptly would undo weeks of progress. He said it would put me back in contact with people who destabilized me. He said I'd spiral again. I asked him if he hurt himself. He said yes. He said he'd been very careful with his words. I grabbed my phone and walked past him toward the door. He didn't stop me. He just said calmly that the elevator wouldn't take me without his confirmation. He said the building had updated access after the garage incidents. He said residents with flagged accounts had safety protocols. I stopped. I turned around slowly. I asked him if that was true. He said it didn't matter. He said what mattered was that I didn't need to leave upset. He said we could talk once I'd calmed down. I sat back down because my legs felt hollow. He brought me water. He set it in front of me like he always did, centered, steady. He said none of this meant he was taking anything from me. He said he was holding it until I could hold it again. I asked him what would happen if I didn't calm down. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said he didn't think that would be a problem. That night, I slept facing away from him. In the dark, I felt his hand rest lightly on my back. Not pressing, not restraining. Just there. Patient. Like he could wait longer than I could. In the morning, there was a notification waiting. Account governance finalized. No option to respond. No timeline. Just confirmation that the structure was now permanent. I stared at it until Ethan woke up and asked if I wanted coffee. I said nothing. He made it anyway. The end didn't arrive as a confrontation. It arrived as a notification I wasn't included on. I found out because my phone stopped working the way it always had. No errors. No warnings. Just quiet refusals. Payments declined softly. Ride apps stalled at confirmation. The grocery delivery stayed pending without explanation. Ethan wasn't home. I checked my email instead. There was one new message from the bank, addressed to him and forwarded automatically to me. Governance review complete. Primary authority confirmed. Secondary access maintained for daily needs. Daily needs. I sat there with my laptop open and understood, suddenly and completely, that this was the shape of the future he'd been building. One where I could function but not decide. One where my life moved but only along routes he approved. When he came back, I didn't raise my voice. I asked him how long he'd planned this. He didn't pretend not to understand. He said planning wasn't the right word. He said he'd recognized a pattern. He said people like me carried too much alone and then blamed themselves when things collapsed. He said he'd stepped in because no one else had. I asked him if he loved me. He said yes. Without hesitation. I asked him if love was supposed to feel like this. He said love was supposed to feel safe. I told him I felt erased. He said that wasn't true. He said I was calmer now. He said I slept better. He said my finances were stable. He said my ex was gone. He said the chaos had stopped. He said look at the results. I asked him what would happen if I asked to leave. He didn't answer right away. Then he said leaving wasn't the same as being free. He said if I walked out like this, I'd be cut off from systems that now expected his authorization. He said restoring independence would take time. He said it would be messy. He said he didn't want that for me. I went to the bedroom and packed a bag anyway. Not everything. Just enough to test reality. When I tried to book a car, the app asked for approval. I didn't wait for his reaction. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. My badge worked on the first door and failed on the second. I stood there long enough for the building to feel smaller than it ever had. Ethan came up behind me quietly. He didn't grab me. He didn't rush. He said I was proving his point. I turned around and looked at him then. Really looked, and understood the last thing I hadn't wanted to see. He hadn't taken control because I was weak. He'd taken it because I was strong enough to survive without noticing the cage being built slowly around me. I left the bag where it was and went back upstairs. That night, I slept alone in the bedroom while he took the couch. Not as punishment, as arrangement. In the morning, my phone buzzed. A final update from the bank. Structure locked. Reversal requires joint consent. I deleted it. Weeks passed. Life continued. He paid the bills. He planned the weeks. He handed me spending money like consideration, not cruelty. People said I seemed lighter, more focused, less stressed. Sometimes I believed them. Sometimes I stood at the window at night and tried to remember what it felt like to choose badly on my own. I couldn't recall it clearly anymore. The last message I ever got from my ex came months later. Short. Neutral. He said he was glad someone was taking care of me. I didn't reply. I turned my phone face down and let the house settle into its quiet, efficient rhythm. Everything worked. Nothing was mine.